This is Radio Japan, NHK World Network Tokyo. It's 9 hours in Japan time, midnight UTC. I'm Takahito Kobayashi with the news. In the headlines, Prime Minister Keizo Obuchi has met U.S. President Bill Clinton in New York and expressed Japan's determination to help resolve the worldwide financial crisis. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party and the two main opposition parties have finally begun joint work to revise key financial stabilization bills. And Japanese and South Korean cabinet ministers in charge of fisheries will meet in Tokyo on Thursday to conclude a new fisheries agreement. Now, the main news in detail. Prime Minister Keizo Obuchi has met U.S. President Bill Clinton in New York and expressed Japan's determination to help resolve the worldwide financial crisis. The talks focused on Japan's role in addressing the crisis. Mr. Clinton stressed the role of domestic demand in bringing about an economic recovery and said Japan has to act swiftly to reform its financial sector. Mr. Clinton said that the revival of the world's second-largest economy is the key to stemming the financial crisis that has spread throughout Asia. In reply, Mr. Obuchi pledged to take appropriate measures to put the Japanese economy on a recovery track. Mr. Obuchi said that his government is determined to stabilize the nation's financial system, and he indicated that Japan is considering additional economic stimulus measures. The two leaders also discussed North Korea's recent missile launch over Japan into the Pacific. Mr. Clinton said that despite the launch, it is important to get Pyongyang to make concessions through the current dialogue channel based on the U.S.-North Korean nuclear accord. Mr. Obuchi said that Japan will keep a close eye on the development of talks between North Korea and the United States to help it to decide when to lift its temporary freeze on its financial contributions to the Korean Peninsula Energy Development Organization. Japan had previously agreed to pay part of the construction costs of two nuclear reactors in North Korea in return for Pyongyang's dismantling of its nuclear weapons program. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party and the two main opposition parties have finally begun joint work to revise key financial stabilization bills. This came after two opposition parties, the Democratic Party and the Peace and Reform Network, accepted the LTP proposals to settle new conflicts over how to handle the crisis of the long-term Credit Bank of Japan. The LDP told the two parties that, as suggested by the two parties, the government will place the LTCB under state control by purchasing the bank's stock. The LDP also promised that it will not apply to the LTCB a planned new framework to use public funds to save ailing banks from collapse. The other opposition group, the Liberal Party, says it will not work with the three parties. The work has been stalled since Friday's broad agreement among the top leaders of the four parties over the revision of the financial bills. The LDP has supported using public funds to save the LTCB, while the opposition parties have opposed it. Japanese and South Korean cabinet ministers in charge of fisheries will meet in Tokyo on Thursday to conclude a new fisheries agreement. The two countries have agreed to reach a basic deal before South Korean President Kim Dae-jung begins an official visit to Japan on October 7th. The talks between Mr. Shoichi Nakagawa of Japan and Mr. Kim Sun-gil of South Korea will follow bilateral working-level talks on Wednesday. The fisheries talks have been at a standstill over a jointly controlled fishing zone around the disputed island of Takeshima in the Sea of Japan. Japan seeks to regulate the number of fishing vessels to protect the marine resources and is aiming for tighter controls on illegal fishing. The Japanese side also wants a relatively small common fishing zone. South Korea opposes such limits. Seoul wants a wider common fishing zone to maintain close catch levels. Japan and China have failed to reach an agreement on the amount of new yen loans to China over the next 2 fiscal years. During working-level talks, which ended on Tuesday in Tokyo, Japan proposed holding down yen loans to China in fiscal 1999 and 2000 to below the average for this year and the past 2 fiscal years. It explained the decision as a result of its tighter fiscal situation and sluggish economy. However, China demanded that Japan keep increasing the yen loans, claiming that it needs money to implement environmental protection measures and to develop its inland industrial infrastructure. It also said it needs additional money to build dams and plant trees in order to prevent floods. The 2 countries will meet at a later date to finalize their plans. Russian President Boris Yeltsin has sent a letter to Prime Minister Kobayashi in connection with a planned visit to Moscow by Mr. Obuchi in November. The letter came in response to a message that Mr. Obuchi sent to Mr. Yevgeny Primakov earlier this month to congratulate him on his assumption of the premiership. In the letter, Mr. Yeltsin says that his new government will continue economic reforms. He also says that Mr. Obuchi's visit will constitute an important step in developing bilateral ties. Mr. Obuchi is scheduled to visit Moscow on the 11th or 12th of November. The date was decided earlier this week during talks in New York between the foreign ministers of Japan and Russia. Now here is a frequency notice. You are listening to Radio Japan, broadcasting on 11.705 MHz, being relayed to eastern part of North America via Sackville, Canada. This transmission is also relayed to Europe via Scotland, England on 6.155 and 6.180 MHz, and to Central Africa via Ascension Island in the Atlantic on 9.665 MHz. Listeners in Asia can also hear this transmission until 15 hours UTC on 11.815 and 13.650 MHz. Now, other news. Tokyo prosecutors have indicted a former senior official of the defense agency and 3 officials from equipment suppliers over the agency's procurement scandal. Charged with breach of trust is Kenichi Ueno, a former deputy chief of the Central Procurement Office of the Defense Agency. 3 others have also been indicted, including the former chairman of Toyo Communication Equipment Company and a former senior official of electronics giant NEC Corporation. Prosecutors say the 4 conspired to lure a refund owned by Toyo Communication after the company was caught padding its bills. The prosecution says this resulted in a loss for the government of about 2.1 billion yen, or $15 million. Prosecutors say Mr. Ueno instructed his subordinates to reduce the over 2.9 billion yen refund, which the agency was to receive from Toyo Communication. Mr. Ueno allegedly conspired with the then NEC official and eventually slashed the refund amount to about 870 million yen. The prosecutor said Mr. Ueno has confessed to the charge, saying he feared that if the agency's budgetary surplus was discovered, he and his boss, who is also under arrest, might be held responsible. An opposition party leader has criticized the government about an agreement with the United States to move toward a joint research on a theater missile defense system. Social Democratic Party leader Takahito on Tuesday spoke to reporters about the agreement on a system for intercepting ballistic missiles. The agreement was reached on Sunday at bilateral ministerial talks in New York, attended by the two countries' ministers of foreign affairs and defense. Ms. Doi said it is the first time that Japan has moved toward military expansion since the end of the Cold War. She expressed the concern that the accord could lead to a new arms race. Ms. Doi also said that if the agreement was in response to North Korea's missile launch in August, then the government is overreacting. The diffusion index, which shows current business trends in Japan, stood at below 50% in July for the 12th consecutive month, reflecting the nation's prolonged slump economy. The key economic indicator is calculated by comparing 30 indices, including industrial output and department store sales, with those posted 3 months earlier. An index above 50% shows an economic upturn, while below 50 signals a downward trend. The Economic Planning Agency announced on Tuesday that all but the two key indices in the constant indicator, which shows current economic trends, stood at 20% for July. The leading indicator, which predicts the state of the economy ahead, stood at just a break-even point of 50 in July. The indicator posted below 50% for 9 consecutive months up to the previous month. The agency officials say these figures reflect the severe economic situation in Japan and that the prospects for increased consumption and employment remain dim, with a strong possibility of a figure below 50% for the month of August. Chief Cabinet Secretary Hiromu Nonaka has suggested that the government will not inject public funds into the long-term credit bank of Japan to save it from collapsing. At the news conference on Tuesday, Mr. Nonaka spoke about the fresh controversy among political parties over whether to use public funds to deal with the crisis of the long-term credit bank. He said that following the recent agreements reached by the leaders of the ruling and opposition parties, the government will scrap the existing scheme to use public funds to rescue ailing financial institutions. The 7th typhoon of the year hit central and western Japan on Tuesday, leaving 9 people dead. The medium-sized typhoon brought gusts of up to 90 kilometers per hour and torrential rain to wide areas of central and western Japan. More than 200 people in 18 prefectures were injured in typhoon-related accidents. Some 400 homes have been damaged. The typhoon disrupted the Shinkansen bullet train line and many regional train services, as well as highway and air traffic. A weakening typhoon is heading north over the Tohoku region of northern Japan. Finally, let's take a look at the top stories at this hour. Prime Minister Kobayashi has met U.S. President Bill Clinton in New York and expressed Japan's determination to help resolve the worldwide financial crisis. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party and two main opposition parties now finally begun joint work to revise key financial stabilization bills. And Japanese and South Korean cabinet ministers in charge of fisheries will meet in Tokyo on Thursday to conclude a new fisheries agreement. That's the news from Radio Japan. I'm Takahito Kobayashi. Next follows our weekday magazine program, Radio Japan, 44 minutes. So please stay tuned.